Hasbro's Force FX Elite version of Ahsoka's curved sabers is not supposed to be out until the beginning of October. Luckily, they shipped a couple of them early. So let's take a look and see what we get. In a previous video, we've already looked at the Disney toy version of Ahsoka's sabers, which are $35 for a pair, come with 24-inch day blades, and are a fantastic cheap and light option for kids and cosplay. We've compared those to the original V1 Legacy version of her sabers, which were $230 for a pair, plus $105 for the two Legacy blades. They were very heavy and had squarish hilts. And we've compared those to the V2 Legacy version they sell now, which are $320 for a bundle, including both blades. Those ones are half the weight of the V1, but with hilts that are slightly thinner but much wider, for kind of a comically large handle. Now we're looking at Hasbro's first attempt at an Ahsoka Rebel saber. It costs $280, it's available at Hasbro Pulse, Best Buy, Entertainment Earth, and all the usual lightsaber retailers. But it only includes one hilt, instead of the usual main plus Shoto pair. So let's see if the quality of what you get makes up for the missing Shoto. As usual with these Force FX boxes, if you open it along the bottom like it looks like you're supposed to, the saber itself is going to be upside down, so when you take it out, everything will fall all over the place. What you want to do instead is open it on the side. Flip it over, and then pull the sleeve off that way. What you get inside is the display stand, the blade, the emitter, the hilt, and the instruction manual. First, let's take a look at the hilt. At a glance, it has all the features that you'd normally expect: the little bowl emitter, the inlays with the diamonds, the grip section, the vented pommel, pretty much your standard what you'd expect. If we compare it to Disney's newest Legacy version, you'll see a couple of differences here. They both have all the basic design elements. Ignore the stickers on the Disney ones, so those come off. It's the dimensions where things get interesting. The Hasbro one is a little bit thinner than the Disney one, but only by like a millimeter or two. It's the width where you can see the difference. The Disney one is about 10 millimeters wider than the Hasbro, which is more than 1/3 of an inch, which is pretty noticeable. So when you pick them up and try and hold them, it's really easy to get your hand all the way around the Hasbro one. With the Disney one, it's still just a little bit comically large. I'm 5'10" and an adult, and it's just hard to wrap my hand all the way around it. If you have smaller hands or you're a kid, that's going to be a lot harder. So on that respect, the Hasbro one is a little bit nicer. It's proportion-wise, width to depth, it's very similar to the original Disney ones, except that it's a couple of millimeters smaller in either direction. So the Hasbro is definitely easier to hold than the old Disney and the new Disney. They're both about 13 inches. Each one has both the extended emitter and the shortened emitter, so ignore that difference. They're both about 13 inches. But of course, with the Disney one, you get the Shoto, which is much shorter, because of course Ahsoka has her long saber in her right hand and the shorter Shoto saber in her left hand. With Hasbro, there is only one hilt. If you want to dual wield, you have to get 2 copies of the same hilt, and then your Shoto is just too long. Of course, if you compare these to the third-party hilts that have a much more screen-accurate sizing, this example is the one made by Elf. This one is 5 millimeters less wide and 7 millimeters less thick than the Hasbro one. So you can see that difference between the width and the thickness is almost 2-to-1 on those ones. And it's a lot closer to 1 1/3 to 1 there. Of course, these are considerably more expensive. They're here only as a reference of what it ideally would look like if you were trying to get closer to screen representation. But as far as the licensed toys, the Hasbro is easier to hold. It is smaller, a little bit closer to the proportions you'd expect, but it is a couple ounces heavier than the Disney one. Overall, they're both a pretty decent size. I would say the Disney one still looks comically wide to me. Everything is just over-accentuated. It almost looks animated. So in that respect, I think the Hasbro one has improved on that a bit. Kind of gives you most of the size improvements that you get with the V2 Disney without going overboard with that thickness. The controls are interesting on this. As expected, this button is the ignition. It makes that noise when you don't have a blade in it. But it also has a secondary button, which is both of the diamonds in the area around it can be depressed as a secondary button. So we'll see how that works once we have the blade in. Attaching the blade is actually one area where I'm really disappointed with this Hasbro one. This is the only Hasbro one that I've had to look at the instructions to figure out how to put the blade in. And while it's very secure, it's really not intuitive. As we saw in the other review, with the Disney one, you just slide it in and twist it, and it attaches. And it's perfectly well attached, nice and sturdy. Simple, easy, ready to go. Hasbro went completely the other direction. Initially, you'd think that you screw off this top part to add on that extender in some fashion, and the whole thing does not go. If you go in, not at that outer ring, but this inside thing, that does come off, but there's not enough space in there to put the blade. That metal bar is in the way. You actually have to look at the instructions and it will tell you to get inside, you have to use the hex wrench that comes with it. I initially didn't see this in the packaging. It's wrapped up in some little tissue paper with the charging cable. But you use that to undo this screw here and pull that screw out. Then this entire top section comes out. And you'll see you've got the hole, no longer with a bar in the middle, and this little groove along the side. The blade also has a groove in it. So you line that groove up and put it in, and then you have to put it all the way down until the black part comes out the bottom, and you'll notice that that hole that the pin went through lines up with the holes in the blade. Then you have to look to see the connector is off to one side slightly, so you have to make sure it lines up properly. Slide that back in, then take that pin back in. You have to wiggle it a little bit to get it to line up exactly. Once it's mostly in, you can use that hex key to get it the rest of the way. And then finally you take that extended emitter piece and slide it all the way over the end of the blade, trying not to scratch up your blade while you do it. Get that all the way to the bottom. Screw it all the way in. And then finally, your blade is attached. See how much harder that is on this Hasbro one than it was on the Disney one? I mean, to be fair, it's really secure with that pin going all the way through the middle. But with what you're gonna be doing with this, it doesn't need to be that complex. All right, now that the blade is in, let's take a look at how it operates. To turn it on, you use that ignition button. And as you can see, it lights up one LED at a time for a very smooth ignition and a very smooth retraction. By contrast, the Disney one lights up in 4 sections, 1, 2, 3, 4, for a much less smooth illusion. If we try it with the lights out, you'll see the Disney one light up in 4 blocks. It's not too bad, but a much smoother ignition on the Hasbro. That slower, smoother ignition is just beautiful on the Hasbro one. Now in person, the Hasbro one is a tiny bit brighter, but the Disney one is a little bit more pure white, where the Disney has a little bit of a yellowish, greenish tinge to it. Honestly, if you're 2 or 3 feet away, you're not going to be able to tell the difference. I think on the blade, they're both pretty close. I'd call that a tie. When you hit the Disney one, it'll flash a little bit just by blinking on and off because it only has white LEDs inside the blade. On the Hasbro one, if you hit it against something, it flashes, it has a little bit of color. It's not exactly a smooth effect. It's lighting up a much larger portion of the blade than, say, the Blaster Deflect does. It's not terrible. I'm not super impressed by it, but I'm not really disappointed either. If you hit that auxiliary button on the triangles, it's going to light up various sections of the blade with a red light to make it look like you're deflecting a blaster. And if you hold that button down, it will light up the tip to give that effect that you're burning through metal. So as far as the blade and the capabilities, the Hasbro one takes the lead in that regard. But of course, if you're going to use it for cosplay and you don't want to, take 10-minute break in order to put your blade in, the Disney ones being able to get the blade in and out that quickly, that's a huge advantage over this overly complex blade system. I really don't understand this. Hasbro's been doing these for quite some time. They've had a bunch of them that are not this complex. I don't know why they're backsliding like this. But there you go. Like most of the Ahsoka sabers, it's got the D-ring at the bottom for attaching it to your belt. It does not come with a belt clip, and it's very floppy, so without meaning to, it's going to flop around a lot. If you want it to stay a little bit more stiff and stay where it is, you can put some putty or light adhesive in there just to keep it a little bit more stiff. If you do want to attach it to your belt, it does not come with a belt clip. But if you go to Amazon and search for Duty Belt Clip, you'll find something like this. There's a bunch of different varieties that will clip to your belt on one side and then have a loop on the other side that you can very easily slide into your belt. And that also makes it really easy to get it back off of your belt when you want to. These are usually about $10 for a 2-pack, so they're really, really easy to find. One benefit of this over the Disney one, though, is that it does not use AA or AAA batteries. If you undo this little latch here and pull off that, it has a USB-C port inside, and it comes with a USB to USB-C adapter. So just plug that in there, plug it into the wall, and it'll recharge. No more throwing batteries into the landfill. It also has a nice little design on the inside to make it look kind of cool. I appreciate that. Then you just click that in there, pull that back again to slide it back in place, and you're good to go. That part is so much easier than that part. Finally, it comes with a standard Black Series lightsaber stand. So it comes in 3 pieces. You slide that bit onto the top there, this bit onto the bottom, and then you pull the D-ring down to go between that slot, and it'll display like that. This is a bad angle for it. As usual, the Hasbro display stands look great on display. In the end, when you compare the two, the Hasbro one has a nicer overall shape and size and design for the hilt, as well as better electronics. But the way that you install the blade is so overly complex, that's a really big drawback. The Disney one is a little bit fatter, looks a little comical, super easy to put the blade in. Close to the same electronics, not quite as good, but not bad. But ultimately, as far as the bang for your buck, for $280 with Hasbro, you get 1 hilt and a display stand. With Disney, for $40 more, you don't get a display stand, but you do get a second hilt. I hate to say it, but money-wise, Disney's kind of still winning. That said, this isn't a bad saber. It's not a bad deal. It's pretty decent. Disney is just ahead in what you get for your money. And those fancy third-party ones cost about twice as much as either of these. But we will be looking at some of these later. So subscribe, stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.